lockdown means that everything you can't go to except the parks. You can only go to the parks.
In the beginning, when we first had lockdown, I was worried and I was frightened to go out, and therefore I didn't mix with anybody. When the kids came round, they stayed outside, and that went on for the whole of the first lockdown. I didn't go out of the house at all.
It's hard to say what a lockdown is, because you're locked down, but you're not locked down. Do you know what I mean? You can go to shops where there's 10,000 people all baying over the same fillet of fish in the fridge, but you go to the pub to have a pint, social distance. I just don't get it.
There was like an avalanche of people where I work, because being in a supermarket and everybody seemed to want toilet rolls and things. So to me it was like the zombie apocalypse. And we opened the doors at 6 a.m. in the morning and all these people just rushed in.
I'm not sure what it means to be part of society, other than it's a bigger version of the community, and lots of communities doing things for the greater good. And I do believe that society can be judged on how it treats its most vulnerable, and that's a good marker. Just like, it's a good marker for someone how they treat a waiter.
No, pass that to me, I'll have it.
When we go to school, we have to wash our hands a lot.
What happened to your hands, Hunter?
They kept on bleeding, so I have to use cream from the doctors.
Why were they bleeding?
Because I wash my hands so much.
Was that sore? Are they better now?
Yeah. Because they're really clean.
At a time like this, you want to be surrounded by your loved ones, don't you? And you can't. In those times of need is when you need the most people around you, and actually at the moment it's totally the opposite.
I think if we'd been told what they know, there's always an element that we don't know. We didn't know what they knew. They didn't tell us what they knew. They didn't tell us what the science was saying. We had to figure it out ourselves, and Italy was shouting out. Italian nurses were shouting out at us what to do, wear masks, don't shake hands, for instance.
Stress, especially like old people, even young people. I remember when I saw first time my little granddaughter, she come to my house and she didn't want to come even near to me. I said, Maya, I want a big hug, babe. Nanny, corona. And she escaped, just stayed there like she's a stranger. That was really, really sad. She's only 8 years old.
People now cross the street and step off the pavement when you come along, even if you have a mask on. It seems to be particularly true of builders. Everybody steps out of the way. I don't know why. Maybe it's because they feel we're dirty or something, but or more dirty than everybody else. But the pandemic has encouraged that sense of other people are diseased, maybe, or sort of dirty, and that sort of general sense of stay away from people, avoid people as much as possible, seems to be a growing phenomenon.
But if you want to take your friends at the park, take some hand sanitizer. But don't share it because they don't need any, but you need some.
I just, started my new job as a producer on a great, exciting documentary in India in March. So I actually flew to India beginning of March before lockdown happened. So I lasted on my new job only a week, and we flew from Mumbai to London. So on my taxi journey from the airport to home, it was about an hour-long journey, and I was like on my phone reading comments of people kind of making jokes about lockdown, saying, "Oh, what are we gonna do? We'll be so bored, and you know, maybe I should start working out more." And I was just sitting in this taxi and like cried for an hour because, you know, I just knew that I am not going to have the emotional space to work out and focus on positive things. I was just going to worry for when my next job is going to be.
I never really understood mental health till before this, and I think I can speak on behalf of a few key workers, particularly some of my colleagues, that I think have experienced a bit of mental health during this pandemic. Work's been difficult, the amount of death I've seen.
I think the loneliness was the worst. You know, my husband and I, didn't see our children or our grandchildren, or, you know, people who died. You couldn't go to the funerals. An online funeral isn't enough, really. I was grateful for people who died before the lockdown, just before, that they had a proper funeral.
The most difficult part was trying to explain to her why she couldn't come. It's not that, you know, Daddy didn't want her to come or Mummy didn't want her to come. It's that you just weren't allowed to come. And trying to explain that to an 11-year-old or a 12-year-old, that the government's not letting you go and see your dad is a little bit difficult for her to kind of grasp.
Last May, I had my 80th birthday, and I celebrated that in lockdown. But I got up in the morning and opened my curtains to a garden full of balloons and bunting and flowers, and people were calling round every day, all day long, to see me, one at a time. And it probably turned out to be better than it normally would have done, to be quite honest.
Well, I think, again, it depends on your particular position in society. I see lots of, I suppose, more middle-class people who obviously, you know, professionals who would normally be working maybe 10 hours a day and might have very little relationship with their kids, and their nannies and so forth do most of the heavy lifting in relation to rearing the kids. But they're home with them, and many of them say, you know, it's been great, notwithstanding whatever frustrations they may feel about their careers. But for other people, it's not quite like that. You know, if you're on very small money, living at home and worried about trying to make mortgages and make food bills and electric bills and all those things, then, you know, it's not quite as nice to sit at home and look out the windows.
You know, in the beginning it was very much like, we're all in this together, stay home. And I was seeing a lot of posts on social media of celebrities or people that had large homes and money and luxurious lifestyles saying stay at home, which that's quite easy to do when you've got money and you've got space, but that's not the reality for the majority of people in this country. They weren't living like comfortable lives.
We definitely get on each other's nerves. The other day we literally looked at each other and were like, I was like, am I annoying you? And she was like, yeah. And she was like, am I annoying you? And I was like, yeah. And we're like, all right, fair enough.
You know, if I was ever queuing in a shop before now, you're aware of people's surroundings and not getting too close. But more so now, I almost get a bit, I'm always looking over my shoulder thinking, oh, you're getting a bit close, lady, you know, back up a bit. And yeah, I do definitely think, and silly things like, you know, the times that you do want to nip to the pub on an afternoon when we're open again. I was actually talking to one of my neighbours over the road about it, and I was thinking, like, what do you drink? How do you stand with a drink? Is it acceptable to ask somebody if you can take up that spare seat? Or, like, how do you behave? Like, how am I going to behave socially now? It's not something I've ever had to think about, but now it's on my mind a little bit almost.
The jobs were normally people, like 10 people were applying for, 5,000 were applying for the same job, or hundreds of people were applying for the same job, so you had no chance really. Unless you were the top qualified man, or you had the best CV, you didn't have a cat and hell's chance.
Pregnant women were told, oh, well, you can have your next checkup just on the phone, you don't need to come in. I wasn't happy with that, as most pregnant women were not, because you just feel like you're getting fobbed off and those checks are there for a reason. So I pushed until I got my face-to-face checks. And in my case, that was really important because certain things were picked up, like at the end of my pregnancy, for example, I had gestational diabetes, and that wouldn't have been picked up if I didn't have urine checks. Things like that, already you feel like you had to really push to get just your basic pregnancy care.
There's a lot of people I know that have had hospital appointments that have been cancelled, and they're kind of worried about them, things that, you know, you forget about them because suddenly this COVID thing is so much more important than, say, your kidney's a bit dodgy, or your eyesight's like funny and you miss appointments for that.
Well, once lockdown's all finished, I would have been in 3 different years. I would have been finished year 6, year 7, and at the start or the end of year 8, and I missed half of year 6, half of year 7, well, 4 months of year 7, and probably gonna, if we go into another lockdown, then I'm gonna miss probably half of year 8 as well.
The friendly smiles that people would give when you're in the shops, or just stopping to talk to people. I mean, before lockdown, I've always had a dog, and I've always walked the dog, and you'd always stop and have a little friendly chat with someone. And at first, it was people would be crossing the road when you approached them, and even now, it still happens. People are avoiding everybody, and I'm hoping that will, when we get back to some sort of normality, people will get back to that community feeling of you can just speak to the person at the bus stop and not feel like they're going to be spreading their germs over you.
We've now got the data as to who the types of people are that COVID is really affecting. It obviously is a serious illness for a lot of people, the old, overweight, people that have got underlying health problems. But I think for the majority of people, it's not actually something that is as serious that has been made out. A lot of people are hysterical at the moment, and I'm not sure that it's like needed or justified.
When you start looking at the data that's being used, one that I've got a big problem with is the COVID death rate, because it's died within 28 days of a positive test. You know, you get a positive test, day 27 you get flattened by a bus, but it's COVID that killed you, which frankly is ridiculous. I think what we really need and needed was a died with, died from, and there is going to be a small section that could be either way, but that'd be far more useful to see what the virus is doing.
You know, the world is sort of split between two groups of people that a lot of people just sort of go along with what they're told, and other people question it. And it's quite obvious that certain lines of query are excluded and silenced and pushed aside. And yet people like me that are trying to make sense of it all from both ends, it's very visible and very clear that there's more at play here.
We need purpose in our lives. We're not designed to be sitting around locked in our houses, losing all meaning. And if there's one thing which makes me absolutely furious, as actually I don't sound that furious for once, but is how the mental health in this country has deteriorated. I'm seeing patients now who are having to sell their houses because their businesses have collapsed. Now, at what point does this wealth health thing? Well, without wealth, there's no health.
The lockdown approach now doesn't really seem to make sense. You know, I think we were all ready to accept it right at the beginning of the pandemic. It was scary. No one knew what was happening or how exactly COVID was caught. And, so as a nation agreed, as many other countries did. Okay, we can give up our freedoms for a short period in the hope that we can save lives. People did that willingly, and I did too. And now, a year later, when we have a vaccine, and thankfully a really good vaccine program here, which has worked very well, is the one thing the government has done very well. And I don't understand why we're not opening up more quickly.
When we come out, or as we are coming out of this, I think there'll be a lot of people that will be damaged. And I say the word damaged, and it sounds really dramatic, but I'd say damaged because of this. A lot of relationships severed, a lot of barriers put up.
Some things that we should go back to, and I think in being able to shake people's hands and hug people and greet people and kiss people, I think that you need that, because that's life, and that's what experiences and sharing love.
We're humans,
and, you grow on that, don't you? You need that kind of that intimacy, whether it's with family, friends, or anybody. You need that to kind of thrive.
You've liked family holiday, haven't you? What's coming after family holiday?
Family adventure.
Family adventure.